we'll have this class recorded. All right. So we're holding, today is Wednesday, the fourth section of the of the Torah reading, and we're discussing a lot of laws and the basis for the legal system that we have. And join me as we learn today's Chumash. We're also going to do Tanya. We are holding way back in Tanya. We're missing from, I believe, Shabbos section or Sunday section, and we will go back to the Tanya sections that we are missing. Okay, so here we go. Elokim loy sekalel. V'nasi ve'amcha loy sa'er. Don't curse a judge. Rashi actually says the word Elokim has a double connotation here. It's a prohibition for cursing God. You're not allowed to, and people sometimes say that, by the way, in their language. So the Torah, this is telling you that there's a violation of saying God blank, God beep, whatever, is a violation of this mitzvah that it's telling us in today's Chumash. But you're also not allowed to curse the judge. And you're not allowed to curse the leader, the prince among your people. It's a prohibition. There has to be respect from Jewish people on their leaders, and the authority, and they cannot trash them, and they cannot talk about it. Them in a terrible way, can't curse them. And that happens, my rabbi, your rabbi, this judge, when they lose a court case, they're very upset. But Torah is telling us that they're not allowed to curse these people. So that is the first mitzvah for today. Continuing right along, and we're going to talk about the donations. I'm not sure the sequence, but it really is jumping around in many different places over here and teaching us different kinds of stuff. The different offerings. So your fullness. Your fullness offering? What offering is that? What offering is the fullness offering? That is referring to the donation, what we call bikurim. Why is bikurim called the fullness offering? Because the first donation in order of at least the sequence of donations that this verse is going to mention is going to talk about that when your produce grows in your field, the first budding fruit that starts to come out, to show appreciation to Hashem that you're recognizing that everything comes from God, you must take that fruit and donate that first budding fruit to Hashem. That is number one. Vidim acha, and your heave offering. What does that mean? That means your truma. That's referring to the truma. Truma is the percentage that the Kohen gets. So we have to give, I believe it's 2% of our field's growth to the Kohen. The Kohen is not, and the Levites not allowed to work. How they have to serve the Jewish people in the temple. How do they support themselves? They support themselves by the community. As they're serving the community gives the Kohen 2% of their produce's growth. So that's called dim'acha, your heave offering. So the first fruits and the 2% that goes to the Kohen, loy sa'acher, you should not delay. What does that mean, loy sa'acher? When a donation needs to be given, it needs to be given in the right order. I guess like by taxes, what tax you got to pay first? State, federal, township, whatever it is. There's a system. So to here, he's telling you that there's a system in the donation process, and everything has to be in order. The first fruit has to go first, and the 2% to the Kohen has to go in the next order. Then I'm going to talk another one. Bechor banecha, your firstborn sons, titein li, you should give to me. That the firstborn sons of the of people that are born to them have to go and be given to the Kohen Gadol. And we actually do this today. The truma we don't have the option to do today to the Kohen. And it's a little complex. The first fruit we don't do today. However, the firstborn gift that we owe our firstborn to Hashem, that the firstborn belongs to God, that we still do today as a donation to Hashem. When do we give the firstborn son? Back to that verse, to the Kohen. Whoever's seen that before, it's called a pidyon haben, the redemption of the firstborn son. When do we give the firstborn son to the Kohen? You have to wait till 30 days. The best time, the correct time for you to make that donation is you keep the child for the first 30 days. And then only after that, the first 30 days, you give the child to the Kohen, you take care of him. And then you exchange, you give the amount of money, the donation for the kohen, and the kohen gives you back your child. But not just do we do this for children, for our firstborn sons, Kain Tasa, so you do l'sharcha for your oxes, l'tzaynecha, and your sheep. What happens if the kohen is really eager to get his hands on your sheep and your ox? So he's saying, I don't want to wait 30 days. Let's take care of business early. So then the earliest the kohen can come is the eighth days from when this animal is born. Shivas yomim yiem imoy. The animal must stay with its mommy, with its mother, for 7 days. And only from the 7th day on, Bayoim Hashmini, on the 8th day, Titnoi Li, should you give the sacrifice to the kohen. So the kohen wants to collect right away. Ideally, the Torah says he's really supposed to wait 30 days, just like by a human. The firstborn son, the firstborn only takes place after 30 days. It doesn't have to be on the 30th day. It really should be after 30 days. And then you should take care of business. However, if the kohen really wants to come early, then the kohen can come as early as the 8th day. But the first 7 days, no, it's not a sacrifice. By all sacrifices, it must be done after a 7-day period. On the 8th day, the sacrifice can be brought. The same thing here is with the kohen. Only on the 8th day can the donation be given to the kohen, not earlier than that point in time. I did see in one of the notes that for larger animals, I believe it said it was 50 days, not 30 days. But that is the ideal time for the gift to be given to the kohen. But again, if the kohen wants to come early, he can only come up to after 7 days. So again, there's a system to everything. First of all, don't curse the judges and the leaders. Second of all, make sure your donations are tithing and your donations are done in the correct order, the way Torah wants it to be done. And also, the dates is a certain time period also when the firstborn animals should be given to the kohen and how early he's allowed to come and collect. Another, jumping completely to another rule. Again, I don't know the sequence, understand the sequence here, but we're just a lot of halachas, a lot of rules that Moses taught the Jews right when they became a nation. God says to Moshe that right in the Torah that you should be holy people to me. The Jewish people should be holy. And then what does he follow up with that? So basically, how are you holy? And if you don't do this next thing that he's going to say, basically God's telling you, then you're not mine. You want to be mine? Do this. If you don't do this, it's disgusting by me, and therefore it's difficult for the Jewish people to be mine. What is the commandment? He tells them, you want to be holy to me, do this. Basar, meat, basada in the field, treifa that was killed, like attacked by a lion or an animal. So if like roadkill, the deer, like for example, we have a lot of that stuff in Jersey here. We have a lot of animals that there's two kinds. There's something called the nevela and treifa, an animal that's not kosher. Either it was slaughtered incorrectly or an animal attacked it and it's not healthy and can't live. But anyway, these non-kosher animals, not slaughtered animals, lo yiseichelu, you should not eat. Jewish people have to only eat meat. They go to the store and buy the meat that was slaughtered, and only that meat are they allowed to eat, but not in the non-kosher section in the store, which is animals that are shot or different ways hunted. You cannot eat that kind of meat. It's not kosher. So what should you do with it? What happens if there's roadkill or there's an animal that the slaughtering wasn't done correctly? What should you do with it? The kelev tashlichun also, you should send that meat to the dog. You have a dog. I know a lot of people in our class have dogs, and dogs like meat, raw meat even. I think a lot of the dogs eat. You take the non-kosher meat and you give it to the dogs. There's an interesting Rashi, a famous Rashi here is, why does he specifically telling you to your non-kosher meat to give it to the dogs? There's a lot of other things you could do with non-kosher meat. Right? In fact, even like the big kosher slaughterhouses, when they check the meat and they see that it's a non-kosher animal for whatever reason, they sell it to a non-kosher meat company and then they give it to a non-Jew. They don't have to eat slaughtered meat. What's the reason that the Torah specifically is advising you what to do with your non-kosher meat? You could sell it on the non-kosher market to a non-Jew, or you can give it to your other animals. Why is it specifically a dog? So I'm going to tell you Rashi's second answer first, and Rashi says something fascinating here. If you remember the Chumash a few parshas ago, we spoke about the experience of the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. It said that when they were leaving Egypt, normally dogs will bark and scream when there's noise. I know when I go near people's houses and there's a dog in the house, I get within a few feet of the door, the dog's barking and screaming. And when the Jews left Egypt and there was a whole commotion, the dogs were quiet. They didn't sharpen their teeth against them. They didn't bark. And the Torah, for some reason, singled out the greatness of the dogs. So here, we're rewarding the dogs for their act. Very interesting. Hashem always repays everyone who does something good. What did the Jewish people do good? What did the dogs do good? They didn't bark for the Jews when the Jews were leaving Egypt. So fascinating. The Torah is telling you here, you have non-kosher meat. Give it to the dog. Pay them back for when we were leaving Egypt. The dogs didn't bark and they were calm and collect who when the Jewish people were leaving Egypt. A fascinating reason. Rashi says that the reason he didn't talk about an idol worshiper is because he was trying to send you a message that an idol worshiper, a person who serves idols, not a regular Gentile, but a person, a Gentile that serves idols, it's better to give it to the dog than give it to the idol worshiper because the idol worshiper is going against God. So if you're giving away your meat, give it better to the dog who's serving Hashem, who's not going against God, than the person who's serving idols and is going against God. Okay, continuing right along. Loi sisa shema shav. You should not accept unauthenticated reports. This is very true today, I guess, also. If something's not true, do not, Rashi says, lashon hara. Even if it is true. First of all, if it's not true, you should be very careful in the information that you accept. There's a lot of information out there on a lot of different topics, and a lot of people will tell you different things about other people, negative stuff, good stuff. Do not accept false information. And even if it's true and it's bad about somebody else, there's an obligation on the person not to accept it. Don't listen to it. Don't accept it. What you hear, rumors, people all the time. By the way, one person tells a friend a bad thing. In 3 seconds, they'll never do it again. Do not accept negative information about other people. Very powerful rule that is continuing in how people should live their lives. Al toshis yadcha im rasha. Do not collaborate with a wicked person. Liyos eid chamos, to be a corrupt, false witness. What does that mean? A guy might come over to you and say one of two cases. One is obviously someone comes over and says, listen, I want to lie, I want to cheat. Can you be my false witness? The Torah is telling you it's prohibited for you to work with him on making up a story, concocting a story and testifying falsely against it. But he's telling you even more than that. In Jewish law, at least for very serious cases, you need 2 witnesses to prove your case. What happens if a guy only has 1 witness? And the case is a real case, but he can't get his money back. Let's say something happened. This guy destroyed $1 million of his property, and he wants to collect, but the rabbis, the court, won't side with him because he doesn't have any way to prove it. But he does have 1 witness that did see it. But the problem is 1 witness is not enough to perhaps get the guy back the money that's owed to him. So what will the guy do? He'll go over to the second guy, says, look, do me a favor. The story's true, and I even have 1 witness of the story, but I need a second guy. So can I hire you? Can I give you a couple bucks, or can you do me a favor? We'll split the proceeds, but can you lie? Can you make up a story? And this is what the Torah is telling you, according to Rashi, another way of understanding it. It's not simply he's asking a witness to lie, but he's asking the witness to he's not just asking just to lie, but he's telling you say the truth, but it's a lie that you really saw it. And here's what the Torah is telling you, that that's also prohibited. So even if it's true, but he's asking you, do not place your hand with a wicked person to be a false witness, is that you're a false witness even if the story is true. And now we get into a very complex and interesting, actually very interesting law on this next verse, number 3. There's actually 3 ways to understand it. There's the rabbis in the Talmud. There's the way Onkelos wants to explain this verse, and the way Rashi wants to explain this verse. What is this verse saying? Let's do it inside. It's very hard to understand it, and that's why there's so many different opinions on how to understand this verse. You shall not follow the majority for evil. Don't follow the majority for evil. What does that mean? Let me continue. And you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit. What does that mean? You shall not respond. What does it mean you shall not follow the majority of evil? What does it mean you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit? And what does it mean to follow many to pervert justice? What does it mean? It's actually a very significant, very important verse because it's going to explain to us the basis for a Jewish court of the way the judicial system works. So I'll go in order of the way Rashi brings it down. So first thing Rashi says is, you shall not follow the majority for evil. That is telling us that if you're deciding a capital punishment case and the majority of judges rule that he deserves a death penalty, and the minority of judges rules that he is not guilty, but there's only one judge that is ruling, that's making the majority to rule that he gets the death penalty. So there's only one, there's a bunch of judges. There's even a case of there's a 23 court judge. Actually, Rashi says the ones who decide capital punishment would not be able to be the regular 3 court judges. You had to go to the higher judges, the minimum of the 23 rabbi judge, the 23 judge court, in order to get capital punishment. So for some reason, there was only one that sided with the majority that he deserves capital punishment, only one more than the rest. And the Torah is telling you it's not enough. If you only have one guy creating the majority in order to kill someone, you don't kill him based on one person majority. There has to be a minimum of a 2-person majority. And that's what the verse is saying. You shall not follow the majority for evil, even though it's the majority. And usually the rule in Judaism goes by the majority. In cases of capital punishment, you would not follow a 1-person majority. Then we're going to go to the end of the verse. A lawsuit to follow many, to follow many to pervert justice. Do not follow many to pervert justice. So if there's one person that is making him, exonerating him, saying that he's not guilty, there's a 1-person majority exonerating him, then follow it for sure. But if it's the one person that's making a majority to do capital punishment, then the halacha is that you cannot follow a 1-person majority in capital punishment. So if it's 51-49, no good. It has to be 52-48 in order to administer capital punishment. That's the way the rabbis in the Gemara understood this verse. Another interesting rule they learned from this verse. I have to share all 3 interpretations. The rabbis also expound. We didn't explain the middle of the verse. The middle says, you shall not respond concerning. What does it mean you shall not respond? Or the words are, you shall not respond. What does that mean you shouldn't respond? What does that mean? So the rabbis in the Talmud want to learn that it means that if the greater judge, so when they would have these 23 court judges or judges in the court, or they would have 71 judges in the court, they would sit in a semicircle. Just interesting how it was, where every judge could see, every rabbi in this Supreme Court could see the other judge. And what would happen is they would go down the line and they would say, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? Once the greatest rabbi who sat at the head of the row would give his opinion, people, according to the interpretation they're giving now, we're saying that no one's allowed to argue with that rabbi. So therefore, you want to start from the lowest guy, right? The smallest of the rabbis, although they're all great rabbis that are on the Supreme Court, but you want to start with the youngest one because you shouldn't argue with the oldest rabbi. So you go to the lowest level rabbi, whatever that means. He gives his opinion, and then you work your way up as the way they sat from their positions and who was in a greater rabbi, a greater position. They would work their way up like that. So start basically the middle of the verse is telling us you shall not respond, which means since you can't respond to the greater rabbi, you want the guy lower to share his opinion first. I want to just say that I remember this is just, I believe that if I'm saying correct, that's Rashi's interpretation of the Talmud, what the Talmud says in this verse. I think also it says in the Talmud, if I remember correctly, that the younger rabbis will be embarrassed to say their opinion to disagree with the greater rabbi, which is also why it says in the Talmud, we want to start with the youngest rabbi first, so he shouldn't be embarrassed to say his opinion. Once the great rabbi says an opinion, then all the younger rabbis won't be excited to share their opinion, especially if it's against the greater rabbi. The bottom line is, the verse is telling us 2 things according to the rabbis. One is it's telling us you need I don't know if the word is a super majority. You don't just have not a 1-person majority. You have to have a 2-person majority. I guess like in the Senate now, certain things, it's not enough to have one more senator on the side than the other. You also have to have more. So the Torah is telling us you have to have majority of two, in order to do the capital punishment. That is the way that the rabbis learned this verse. Second way of learning the verse, here's a whole nother way. The Onkelos, the commentary called Onkelos, says a little bit actually the opposite in a sense of what we just said. Onkelos is saying, we're not telling you that you shouldn't, once the great rabbi says his opinion, people shouldn't argue with him. Onkelos is saying, we're saying exactly the opposite. What does it mean? You shall not respond, You shouldn't hold yourself back from responding. If you have an opinion, you must say it. You're not allowed to hide your opinion. If you're here on this court and you're getting involved in judicial matters, and it's a case of life and death, it's a case of capital punishment that you're on the court over here with us, you're not allowed to excuse yourself and say, I'm not giving my opinion. No, you're here. If you have an opinion, you must talk your mind. Whoever's on this court must not be afraid and must speak up their mind and must share exactly what they're thinking about this case. We want to hear everybody's opinion on this court. That's the way Onkelos says. Kind of the opposite a little bit of what Rashi, of the way Rashi brought the rabbis interpreting that interpretation. And he continues to say, the verse is telling you cannot move yourself aside. You cannot excuse yourself. So it's very interesting the way Onkelos is reading this verse. You shall not follow the majority for evil. Speak up your mind. Say what you think. You shall not respond concerning a law to follow that may prefer justice. You're here to talk your mind. That's really the main key of how Onkelos is understanding. He's the Aramaic translation of the verse, the way he's understanding. And finally, I'm going to share with you Rashi's interpretation. Rashi learns that if you're sitting in the court and you're a judge on this court and you believe that they're all corrupt, or you believe the way that they're deciding the decision is corrupt, you should speak your mind. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to speak your opinion. Do not say, I want to leave the court. Stay on the court and say your opinion in that court if you believe the judges that you're sitting with are acting incorrectly and perverting justice. You shall not follow the majority for evil. You should respond. You shall not respond and to prevent justice from coming. But another point Rashi makes also is normally when a judgment takes place, we don't tell the litigant, the prosecutor and the defense, we don't tell them which judge says what. Once the judges rule and make a ruling, whatever they rule, no one's allowed to know who argued which case. So let's say there were 3 judges on a court. One of them was pro the defense, and 2 of them were against the defense. You can't go after and tell the guy, you can't go back and tell the guy, listen, you can't go back and tell the guy, listen, I was the one who was on your side. Normally you can't say that. All you could do is, you can't argue his case. You have to represent the people and say, look, this is what the court came to. This is the reason what the court said. I guess like in our judicial system, imagine the Supreme Court. I think maybe, I'm not sure about this, but it seems to me like from this verse in Torah law, the judges would not be allowed to tell them their arguments for their sides. This is what the court decided, and we're backing the court. However, the verse is telling us, Rashi is saying, if you believe that the rest of the judges on your court are corrupt, you should leave the court and say, look, I know you got a bad ruling, but I believe in my opinion that the rabbis, the judges I sat with on this court are corrupt, and I'm telling you right out clearly that I disagree with the ruling over here. However, I was a minority, and therefore I couldn't say my opinion. It's another very fascinating verse, and the Torah's perspective on how judges should rule. Continuing right along, those are 3 opinions there. Verse 3, you cannot be Robin Hood, he's telling us. V'dal loised dar berivoy. Adal, a poor man, so this poor guy goes to court. He's against the billionaire who's suing him in court. And the judge looks at this guy with ripped clothing or in challenging situation. And the judge feels bad. He says, Rahmanis, the rich guy should be supporting the poor guy. And the Torah is telling us here, no, that's illegal. That's not allowed. Judge has to be fair and square. Dal, said the Beriv, you cannot show glory to a poor man. The law is the law. You have to follow the letter of the law. Charity you do out of the court. In the court, the law, you cannot show graciousness to somebody who is a poor person. Verse 4. Another interesting rule. Another topic. You meet your enemy's bull. Or his donkey, toya, and they're lost. and you're walking down the road, you're going down in the olden days, you're traveling in the desert, you're traveling on the road, and you see the guy's donkey, and you're like, good for him, he lost his donkey. Torah says, Hashiv Tashiven Ulai, you must return it. There's another mitzvah in Torah. We have an obligation. It's very interesting. We have an obligation to, if you have the ability and you see somebody's property that's lost, there's a commandment in Torah, there's an obligation for you to return an item, even if it's a guy you hate. You hate the guy. You come back to him, you say, look, here's your $1,000 donkey that you lost. I have to return it to you. It's an obligation in Torah. And another law, similar idea. Kisira chamor seinacha. You see the donkey of your enemy. You have an enemy, another guy. Unfortunately, this guy has a lot of enemies, I guess. You have an enemy, a guy you don't like, and you see his donkey, but this is not time, he's not lost. He's found, but roivitz tachatz masai. He's laying under his burden. He can't get up. So he needs a hand. I guess it's similar today to maybe like a flat tire. So you see this guy and he needs your help. Why do they need help? I think one of the ways it is that the donkey can carry the load, but sometimes he has a hard time getting up from the load. And the guy needs a hand in order to lift his donkey, and you walk by and you're like, good for him. Again, the Torah says, you cannot carry this hatred in our heart against our brothers and bring it on to the animals and so on. Do not think, God forbid, that you're not going to help him. You must help your brother's animal who is struggling under it. So even if you hate the guy, God forbid, the person would never be allowed to just let the person go and say, I hate the guy, I'm not going to help him. It's a commandment in Torah to help another person. So unlike our maybe civil law, which we're all about what's our rights, Torah is telling you, we learned yesterday, you have to loan money to the poor person. It's a commandment. If you see something lost that belongs to somebody else, you're obligated, even if you hate the guy, to return it to him. And finally, if you see his animal struggling under his package, you have to go and help that person. And you can't say, I hate the guy, I don't want to help him. And that is the end of today's Chumash. Any questions or comments on today's topic?
Yes, Rabbi. I was interested in the first of the three interpretations of, I guess I'll call it Jewish law and an infraction and a jury and a judge. The way I had interpreted that, and tell me if this is off base or related, was that, I've read about this before, was that if somebody had broken the law, and let's say there's a jury of 9 individuals, and they all unanimously believe he's guilty, it's
not guilty.
No, he is guilty. He is guilty.
Right.
That he is, it's obvious. I mean, there's no debating it, and they all immediately agree. Then in that case, they cannot, under Jewish law, they can't commit a capital punishment because, and what's the reason for that from Jewish law perspective is because there was no discourse.
Everyone has some good.
Discourse.
Everybody has some defense. Everyone has some good. So if you didn't even give the guy a chance, correct, then the halacha would say, it's not here. That's not what our discussion is now, though.
Oh, okay.
That's not discussion today, but that's correct. That's another topic on its own. If I remember correctly, you're exactly right in what you said, that if you see no good in the person, then there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the judges, because how could there be a person without any defense, without any good? There has to be something. And if you didn't find it, then it wasn't a fair case.
The lesson sounded really familiar to something I had read, but I guess it's
no, that's true. But that today we're saying he does have defense, and he has a majority. So he has defense even, and he has a majority. But one, I guess, in a capital punishment case, imagine, like you're saying, in your case where the jurors are making the decision, the judge would say in halachic circumstances, it's not enough that there be, I don't know how many jurors they usually have in these cases. It's not enough that to be 11 to 10. There's got to be 12 to 10 in order for us to find this case. So
you can't just have one. You can't have one more. You have to have
for capital punishment. Correct. Exactly. That's exactly what the Torah is saying over here.
Okay.
According to one of the interpretations. Yes, Ira.
You mentioned 23 judges. Where's
Yes.
that come from? Where's that number from? It seems, I know you got to have a lot of Jews for a discussion, but that seems a little bit overwhelming.
For capital punishment, you have to have 23 judges. Can you imagine 23 Jews getting together and discussing this one topic? Yes. there in every city, in every town, there has to be a small rabbinic court. I remember learning in the Rambam a while ago in Maimonides, but then they would have larger courts, larger judges, and the whole, I guess, like the state would have a larger court, and that would be the court of 23. And then, as we know, there was the Sanhedrin, who was on the Temple Mount, who had 71 actually. So they had the Supreme Court had 71 people on. You want to talk about a major halachic conversation going on. So the 23 people, the Rambam describes it. They would sit literally in a semicircle. They would all go from one to the next and hear everybody's opinion, and then they would deliberate on it. And and such a serious crime, that is the ones who would decide it, right? So I guess you need to have that amount of people in order to make that decision of a court. It's not like jurors today, I guess, because today on our jury, it's just regular guys, right? It's just the common folk, people in the community. But according to here, according to Torah, the minimum would be 23 people in order to do a capital punishment. 23 rabbis.
It actually says 23 somewhere?
No, not in the Chumash, but I'm just telling you here we're not discussing how many people are on the court. The one case in Torah we have is 70, when Moses gives his glory over to them to assist him, right? We have the case of 70 people, I believe is what the number that we have in Torah for recognizing the Supreme Court, for the Sanhedrin. But here he's just telling you that it has to be a two-person majority. That's all he's telling you over here. So it doesn't say a number, it just tells you it has to be a two-person majority, whatever the number is.
Can they serve on both the Sanhedrin and the regular court?
I think the system, they probably, in theory, they could, but it seemed like they were just for different areas, because each area had their Besdin, their court, where they were. I don't know if people would, there are times where they would do a switcheroo, you're right. There are times which, let's say, the Rambam describes it actually. So let's say it was equally split, or let's say, let's say it's equally split. What do? Because some people could abstain and they say, look, I don't want to get involved. I don't know. I'm excusing myself from this. And then they would add people to the court in order to try and get a decision to whatever, to get some kind of majority in order to where they need to go. Yes, Terry.
So you're saying that it has to be with a majority of 2 in order to convict them, but I thought,
No, just for capital punishment.
Yeah, but capital punishment, I thought you have to have 2 eyewitnesses as well.
Correct, because we don't believe one. Correct. How do we know? The judges will decide if it's true or not, but then they'll also interrogate. You have to have a minimum. You have to have two witnesses in order to determine any fact.
So how many people did they actually kill or take capital punishment for? Because to find 2 witnesses and then a majority of 2 is like
extremely infrequent. The Torah level, the bar for convicting someone of capital punishment is almost impossible.
What if he admits to it?
What?
What if he admits to it?
Then it's funny, because could you admit to there are certain things in a way that I'm trying to think into a fine he can't admit. Another thing is you're right, it's not so simple. I'm saying it doesn't matter even if you admit. I think there has to maybe be witnesses, he has to be warned, he has to be in sane mind. It's not so simple. It's so complex. I don't know offhand. Again, it's hard for me to be familiar with all these different laws and talk about them with knowledge on all these different topics, but just offhand, if a Bezdin killed once in 70 years, it was called a murderous Bezdin, because by the time you interrogate the witnesses, and did the witnesses act as witnesses should, which means they had to warn the guy, and they had to see it from beginning to end, and they had to see the actual act, and both had to see the same act. It was, the Torah raised the bar of, because even today, there's nothing beyond the shadow of a doubt. But there is things even today, like, what are you 100% sure? Like, what are you 1,000% sure about? Right. It's very hard to reach that level. Torah raised the bar so high for administering capital punishment. It's very, very hard to reach that level.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have to be sure, be on the side of that. By the way, I gave a course in JLI once a while ago. It seems like there's a lot of people convicted in jail that are not incorrectly. There's a significant percentage of people that are incarcerated, and it's not true. There's stories recently, it makes it the news sometimes. It's a guy in jail for 30 years and they find out it wasn't even him. So the Torah really has a very high level to convict someone. You have to really be sure. Yeah. Okay, good question. Excellent, Terry. Very good question. Anybody else have a question or comment? Yes, Gershon.
I got a question. I don't know if I missed this part, but the first verse, 27, you should not curse a judge, neither shall you curse a prince among your people. Is that strictly referring to the Jewish people, or is that like the people you live among? Like, is that strictly?
It seems it's talking about a Jewish judge. The context. I'm not saying you're allowed to curse somebody else, but I'm just telling you the context seems to me, because it says Elokim. So just the terminology here is you know what? Someone asked this question yesterday. Would these stuff apply to others too? Probably. You know what? I don't know. You'd have to go on a case by case and see if a non-Jew wanted to be judged by Jewish law, would it apply to him? Some stuff yes, some stuff no. I don't know offhand. It's a good question. We'd have to
like with this, the prince of your people, is that like considered like a president? Like, what does that even consider these days?
What is it considered? Leader of your people. Nasi ba'amcha. So that's clearly saying Jewish. A leader in your people. That means
the tribes, the leaders of the tribes.
Leaders of the Jewish people, the leaders of the tribes. I don't know if it's only
not Israel, the state. Or the country, I'm sorry.
No, I wouldn't think so. I don't think so. I think it's more talking about like spiritual leadership and stuff like that. It's a good question. There's so many laws. I want to tell you there's pages and pages of Talmud on this stuff. We're just tasting and we're trying to give a little bit of a thing. But it seems to me it's talking about, right, I would imagine it's talking about the spiritual leaders of the tribes. Would we learn out rabbinically? Would there be an offshoot to other things? Possibly. I don't know offhand. I mean, these laws are very complex, just a little bit. It's possible. I don't know, Gershon. I don't know if we can learn out a regular judge. Would it be a civil judge in Israel? I don't know. Could be. It doesn't seem like it to me, but I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of information behind this stuff there. All right, let's leave it at that. Sorry, let's move on to the Tanya. We're going to go back in Tanya for a few days ago. And what I want to talk about is enjoying the journey versus the end result. So I think that's a big thing. It's a huge thing actually in life, in enjoying the journey. People get very frustrated. People get very nervous and about the challenge of getting wherever they're going because they know where they want to go, but there's a tremendous challenge of getting wherever they're going, right? There's a tremendous challenge there. And the struggle in the Tanya we left off, I know we haven't spoken about it since Friday, but where we left off with Tanya in that day was that earlier we said there's different challenges that make a person sad, right? What did we say the challenges are that make a person sad? Physical challenges, right? Family, financially, which make a person sad, and we address those. Then we said there's challenges of guilt, which means you've done wrong things in your life, and we address that. And then last Friday, we started talking about shame. So shame is something that you feel from sometimes the struggles that you're having. You might get a low self-esteem from the challenges that you're having. And they're not challenges that you choose because you can control your thought, speech, and action, but you cannot control the impulses and the addictions that you have. They're biological and just naturally who you are. All right, my friends. So we're going to be addressing that. You're the person that is struggling and you have an animal instinct that's liking and lustful to physical things. You might be very challenged by that. Why shouldn't you be upset about that? Why shouldn't that frustrate you that you're really dealing with these challenges? So join me in today's Tanya. It's not today's Tanya. We're going to go back and we'll catch up slowly. I know the Chumash has just been so tremendous that we've fallen behind the Tanya, but we're going to go back now. But let me just stop and start again and go back to that chapter.